Hello and welcome to Sisters Assembled, your home for all things MCU. And it's Fantastic Four First Steps opening weekend, which means we are coming at you with spoiler-filled, listen to that carefully, spoiler-filled reactions. If you haven't watched the film, please go do that, and then come back, because we will not be shying away from all of the things that happen in the film today. So please make sure that you are paying attention to that. But we're very excited to dive into this because I know we both felt very strongly about this film in a very positive way. With all that being said, and with the spoiler warning out of the way, I'm going to let Katie kick it off.
I really liked it.
Me too.
I really liked it.
I
I was so nervous going into it. I mean, I don't normally try to look for, first reactions or critics' reactions or anything of that nature because, and like I said, the emphasis there is the word try. But I want to go in open-minded 9 times out of 10 because I'm on our socials and I'm, seeing all sorts of stuff. I always end up seeing it anyway, or at least see some of it. I did know that there were relatively positive reactions, but I didn't know too much about it because I purposely was like, I don't want to see it.
And God forbid a spoiler. Like from anybody who got the previews.
Yeah, and there was definitely like the whole ban on some of it went up really early and like things of that nature. So I was really worried. But so I went into it kind of as blind as I could be. And I was nervous because, you don't know what you're going to get. And everything looked great, and then you go to the movie and you're like, oh, okay. But that didn't happen here. I mean, I genuinely, from beginning to end, I was like, dang, this movie was so well done. I think, just to kind of point out a highlight for me, because obviously we're going to go a little bit further into it in a second here, but honestly, I think the biggest highlight was I was nervous on how they were going to handle dropping us into this Fantastic Four story without us knowing this Fantastic Four story. And so while I was really,
Hey, buddy. He's back.
Dream guest on our podcast. It's Gambit. Okay, thank you. But so while I was really, unsure of how that was going to work out for us at the end of the day, it worked out great. I didn't feel like I didn't belong in their story. And that is something I was really worried about.
Yeah, I think that's so fair. I actually think the way that they did that was so smart. Like, we were a member of the audience of that, what was it, Ted Gilbert show? That was like ingenious because, to your point, we didn't have to do the whole go with them on the spaceship. We got the, all right, if you don't know the Fantastic Four, here's the down and dirty. Here's what you need to know. Here's all the things that have made us as a collective community, Earth, whatever you want to call it, New York at the very minimum. This is what makes us love them. This is the way that they've continued to protect us and the way that they've earned this reputation. Done in 10, 15 minutes. Boom.
Yep.
And I was like, brilliant. Now I'm here. I'm firmly ensconced. I understand their history. And guess what? It didn't take a half an hour. So now we have so much more of the film. And I think that was what, well, there were actually quite a few things that they did that I wasn't expecting, like ways it ended up coming to life that I think were different than, what we had anticipated if you go back and listen to our predictions. But I think one of the things that really stood out to me was everything seemed to be happening so much earlier in the film than I anticipated, right? Like, I think we thought, oh, Galactus is going to come. I don't know. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in my head, I was like, oh, maybe like halfway through. No, Galactus was in there in the first 30 to 45 minutes. Like,
yeah,
it came pretty quickly. And I think part of that was helped by the fact that they didn't spend 30 minutes going up into space and doing all that. And we knew they weren't going to do the origin story, but they also could have really flopped giving that recap. I don't want to talk badly about the Tom Holland Spider-Man because y'all know I love him, but I do think like not having like a little bit more than him and Ned having a conversation, like, I got bit by a spider one day, like, yeah, we all know the story, but like it's also like one of the most iconic stories of all time. This is of that level, and they managed to do it in a way that treated it with the level of care that it deserved without belaboring the point, because we've seen it all twice within the last 20 years. I loved that. I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
I think the other thing that I could not get enough of this film, and one of the things that helped me be so fully engrossed in it was the retro 60s vibe was flawless. And you could see that in the trailers, but the way that they executed it so well, y'all know I live in New York. That didn't look at all like the New York I live in. You know,
Yeah.
there were some, you know, you could see the Empire State or the Chrysler building in one of the shots, one of the two, I can't remember which one now, but you could see it in one of the the skyline shots, and that was great. So there were like iconic monuments, but at the same time it was so clearly a different New York, and you were so firmly set in it. And the way that, you know, they have this crazy technology, yet the hair, the outfits, it was all the things that we saw in the 60s. And I was just like, I'm so obsessed. I just remember thinking to myself, how do I get myself into Earth 828? Because this is where I want to be living my life. It seems so amazing. And that was just mind blowing to me. That was executed so far beyond any of my expectations that I was like, all right, I will never say anything bad about this director because he just executed a flawless like aesthetic vision right here.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. It I never was taken out of it.
Agreed. Yeah.
And I think some of that's to the actors as well. They did such a good job, but I do think the set from top to bottom, it was the 60s, but it was a different version of it because to your point, there was this technology that we still don't have. They have a flying
Yeah.
car. Like we don't have that. We
Where
don't
do
even
I
have
get me
that
one of
in
those?
well, we don't even have that in the Marvel universe, like our typical 616. We don't
Yeah.
really see that kind of stuff. So like I really liked how he married both of them to make them make sense. But again, like I was actually really thrown in a good way by Times Square
Yeah.
because that was very weird to know. Like we've stood there how many times, and obviously I know it looked different like 60 years ago at this point, but still, you know, I liked that a big factor of it wasn't Times Square and they used it as a plot, like it was part of the plot, and it didn't feel like Times Square.
Yeah.
And I really liked that. I mean, how many other movies? I'm thinking my most like top of mind is obviously The Amazing Spider-Man 2 because
Yes.
that makes me think of that. And I just compare those two mentally and I'm like you could have told me that was any other city and I would have been like, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, what I liked about it is it felt like there were elements that you were like, yes, I see Times Square, but it was
Yeah.
like Times Square with a like almost behind a different, like a pair of sunglasses or like a
Yeah.
different color lens or something. It was like just a covered up just enough that you could feel the familiarity, yet fully understand that this is not the Times Square that we all know, or even the Times Square that we would know in the MCU. And I
Yeah.
loved that. To your point, I think taking some of those really iconic, you know, locations and being able to put their own twist on it and so firmly say, we know your MCU. Let me say this. We know your 616.
Yeah.
This is not your 616. Arguably, I like this universe better, but that's just me. I loved it. I thought it was incredible.
That's
I
such an
just
interesting take considering they almost all just died, but go off.
but like the world of 828 is so vibrant and different from the MCU, or like I keep saying the MCU. So vibrant and different from 616. I think
Yeah.
it feels like an escape more than 616 because 616 is so clearly mirrored off of the universe that we all live in. Like obviously there
Yeah.
are different things and Asgard doesn't exist in our world, but there's so much that like does clearly reflect the world that we live in, and 828 feels like such an escape because it is so different. It gives it almost like a more fantasy type feel because you're so removed from the world that like we all know.
Yeah. I mean, I think actually a huge aspect of it for me that kind of makes it feel that way is the connectivity of it. Because obviously we love our 616 and what has made up our MCU for the past X amount of years at this point. I don't know. But I'm not doing that math currently off the top of my head. But
17, but it's okay.
17. Well, I know I was like 15, 16. Oh, I don't care. Either way, we love it. We
Yeah.
know we do. But at the end of the day, I do have to say, like, there is not that feeling of everybody loves our heroes. And that's fair because I think if they existed and were tearing down my city all the time, I don't know if I'd love them either. But I loved that the whole city, I mean, honestly, the whole world, but really the city because that was where it was based. So we got to see it more. Just love the Fantastic Four. they loved everything about them. And I think obviously we saw how that played such a pivotal role in how the story then played out, because we saw that switch and then we saw it switch right back when they talked and really came to the people and were like, you are our people too. You're our family. We don't do what we do if we didn't have you guys. And so this is why this is not an easy choice for us and we can't make this choice. So I really liked that. It just felt so, especially for New York in the nicest of ways, it just felt so not New York. And it really takes you out of what you anticipate from that city. And so I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I think we don't get to see enough of that interaction. I think the closest we probably had was the Avengers in the first Avengers movie. Otherwise, I don't feel like we get to see that same depth with our characters. And I don't want to say they're fans, but essentially they're fans.
Yeah. And to your point with the Avengers, because I think we get, what is it, an end credit scene where they're all like, oh, I love you, Captain America, I love you, the Hulk, and they have like their masks or
Yeah,
whatever.
somewhere in there.
But then it switches so fast because by the next Avengers movies, they're going to Sokovia and they're spray paint against them. Like people don't want them there. There's
Yeah.
such a flip in terms of sentiment. Whereas to your point, like it happened in this film too, but they were able to speak to them on such a human emotional level. And I think that with the Avengers, and this isn't a slight against the Avengers, but I think they were never able to really connect with the people in that way. They kept themselves a little bit more separate. Whereas I think one of the cool things about the Ted Gilbert segment at the beginning is not only did it talk about like what they were doing to, combat different bad guys or whatever who were trying to create chaos, but it also showed like, okay, Reed's also has his own like TV science segment, and Sue is
Yeah.
a diplomat, and all of these things about the way that they were going about wearing their power in a meaningful way. Like there's always this adage of like if you have great power, you have great responsibility, and I think they were doing such a good job of living up to that responsibility,
Yes,
and that's what
definitely.
earned them the respect. And I think if you're comparing to them to the Avengers and why that sentiment switched on them and never really quite switched back until the end of Endgame, they never were doing that. I mean, I know there was some Stark
Well, to them,
initiatives
it
and
was always
stuff.
a job.
Yeah.
It was a job
Yeah.
and you go, you clock in, you clock out kind of mentality. And for the Fantastic Four, it's their day in and day out life. This is
Yeah.
who they are. And
They're public servants in the truest
yes,
sense of the term.
yes, for
Yeah.
sure. No, that's it. Then that's exactly it. And I think it was almost refreshing because I
Yeah.
mean, listen, I get it. I love a Civil War just as much as the next one. That was such a good movie. But that obviously also created such turmoil with how people thought about the Avengers. And then that only kind of went downhill for a while. And to your point, I think started to come back with Endgame, but they're still not completely there. Everybody's like, there are no Avengers. They're not really
Yeah.
acknowledging the heroes that they do have. And so I think it was really nice to sit there and live in this little society for the first time. That's like, wow, everybody's like reasonable and likes these people and they like these people back, and it's just nice to see.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I'll say about this, the thing that really struck me was the scale when they were building the bridges on
Which was
in all the major.
amazing.
I mean, that was to mobilize the entire planet like that, to be able to not only build them, but then to have those rolling blackouts that people were willing to do. I mean, you haven't seen that level of just people banding together since some of the biggest wars that have gone on, right? Like in history. And I think that's another way that they were able to kind of tap into that era, because if you think about it, obviously the world wars were happening in like the late 19s and the 40s, if my memory is correct. I obviously know the 40s, but I cannot remember World War 1 to save my life, but I want to say the late teens.
Yeah.
In those eras, people were doing this type of stuff. There were blackouts, there were things like that. They were rationing and all of that. And I think as it's we haven't seen that level of people kind of coming together and understanding we are doing this for the greater good. We are making sacrifices in much of the modern day. And I think that was another way that it kind of called back into the eras of bygone times of people being unified and able to do that and understand what I'm doing has a purpose. Even though I am one person, I am making a difference. And there's even a line in the film where it's like, just because a small group of people are making a big difference, that's the best way to do it. And I think they really illustrated that so much with everybody just getting on board and understanding, like, our planet's on the line here, folks. Like, we have to do this. And they really executed it well, and showed it on such a great grand scale. And that was honestly a part that really struck me. I was like, wow, like, that's insane to watch them mobilize and then unify in that way.
Yeah. No, it definitely wasn't. Kind of on the same hand, just a earlier part to that, what I think struck me the most during the film was actually Sue's speech to everybody, which is kind of what I was getting at a little bit, when she's essentially the one who said, like, we're all in this together, but because we're family, like, is it right to ask me to give up my child? Truly? Because
Yeah.
I understand it's for the greater good, but this is my child.
Yeah.
And we love him and we're all family and we want you to love him, but not I'd never ask that of you, essentially. And I want to bring him into this world that's not going to be getting destroyed. And so she was like, guys, this is where we need you to understand and to help us so that we can figure out a different solution than having to make that trade. And I thought that was just it was a very powerful moment. And again, it's just touching to be able to see these characters have a relationship with the general public in the way that they do. I really think it's just a powerful thing to see, and we really don't get to see it anywhere else. So for her to have gone down there and been like, hey, actually, this is where I'm at. We're trying to figure something else out. And for them to understand that because they love them and they're like, you know what? Yeah, for the past like 4 years, you've been saving our butts and you've been doing all this stuff for us and we love you. I think that was just, it was cool to see.
It was. And I think what was nice about that, and why it worked so well, is she basically reminded everyone, like, hey, we have these powers. We are inherently enhanced from you, essentially. But at our core, we're still human, right?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that was happening in the conversation about, like, oh, they should just, sacrifice Franklin and give him up and all this stuff, is like, I think it's when you're in that situation, and I think this is what Reed was getting at too, it's like, it's easy to forget that that is a human being. And so for Sue to walk out with her baby, she was almost saying gently, I'm reminding you, I dare you to look at this baby and say, yeah, we should definitely sacrifice him to this gigantic space entity that wants to eat us all. Like, just
Yeah.
this level of, like, I'm gonna come down here and I'm gonna talk to you and remind you, this isn't a car where you're like, hey, just get rid of your car. No, this is my human child.
Yeah.
So let's just all think about that and get on that level. And she did it in such a graceful and loving way. And I think you could have been very angry and that wouldn't have had the same result. And so she was very, like, she handled that perfectly. But I do think, like, that was the other piece. I was like, she did a good job of reminding people, like, the Fantastic Four aren't just the Fantastic Four. They're husbands, their wives, their friends, brothers, sisters. Like, there are relationships there that go beyond just, I put on this suit and I save your butt when Mole Man decides to do his thing.
Yes, exactly. And again, from what we're used to seeing, it's just such a nice switch of being like, I'm a person too.
Yeah.
And we've had these connections all this time. So just because this moment is making you question these connections, that doesn't mean that we don't have them, and that you can't still look at me as somebody, your neighbor, the person next door, your I don't remember what she's like, a diplomat and all this, like the person that's going to bat for you guys. So I thought that was a touching part of the entire film. I thought it also played such a good part of the narrative because it did make it also so much easier, because I think, I don't know if we pointed out in the predictions, but I know we spoke about, at least with each other, the connection of Galactus being on Earth. Like, we see it. We all see, I could picture that perfect trailer moment.
The foot.
And yeah, and we all, I know, like I said, I don't know if it was on the podcast or not, but we all were like, at least we were, hey, where are the people? Why are there no
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
here? And to know that at the end of the day, it ended up being because the people were so a part of this process that they were like, yes, we'll be relocated down to this underground society with it, which was a strange little like side quest. But I was like, it worked. And have that be just like such a convenient thing to have happened. But I also, and I know it's hard because I'm comparing them to the Avengers, but to have Ben seriously sit there and say, "What about all the people around? He's gonna come here. He's gonna be stepping around places.
Yes.
What about all the people?" And I was like,
Mhm.
as soon as he said that, I was like, a hero that's like, this is gonna cause damage. We should think about all the people that will be involved in this prior to the fact of us having this massive battle that's going to hurt people and things of that nature. And
Yeah.
I really was like, these people care. They
Yeah.
really do. I have such a weird parasocial relationship already with this Fantastic Four. It's not even funny.
I'm literally obsessed with them. But yeah, the whole and the fact that like Mole Man was kind of their enemy. I know he and Sue like were able to come to like an accord and basically reach an agreement about everybody kind of living in their lanes and doing their thing and staying out of each other's way, and that was great. But even for him to basically open up the doors and be like, this is bigger than me and my beef with Reed, like we're gonna do this for you. And then he was like little mayor of his own town. It was so cute. Love Paul Walter Hauser, did a great job. So yeah, even that, like again, like it's just, I think the film shows so much unity and so
Yes.
much like understanding of the greater good, which I think can be missing in a lot of the other MCU films, even with our heroes. Like to your point, they're not always thinking like, oh, if I don't want to come at your girl Wanda, but I'm gonna. It's like the prime example when she, diverts the bomb at the beginning of Civil War and ends up killing people in the building. That wasn't intentional, but it also like could have been handled better. So like just the fact that they're thinking about this, what is the collateral damage? How are we going to affect the day-to-day citizens? How can we ensure their safety? And some of it is they do have the power to mobilize the people, right? Like the Avengers are so polarizing. Even at that point, no one would listen to them.
Yeah.
So I don't want to completely villainize the Avengers. Obviously, we love them, but the Fantastic Four do have a level of power in that they are so universally loved and people will listen to them. When Reed Richards or Sue Storm or Johnny or Ben says to them, "Hey, I need you to get on a bus and go underground." People got on the buses and went underground.
Yeah.
Even Steve Rogers, he says that 30, maybe 35% of people do that. And then the others are like, screw Steve Rogers, like, screw the Avengers.
Yeah.
Who's, in charge of them? Why do they get to decide what I do? It's just a little bit of a different environment. So I don't want to completely come after our guys for that
No,
one.
but I do think it's so interesting. It was kind of a breath of fresh air, even though
For
so much was
sure.
happening in this movie. Like, to your very early point, Galactus was in this movie very quickly. And
Yeah.
that's not what we anticipated. And I didn't anticipate the entire movie being about beating Galactus. Not that obviously, that's we know going in is like that's the antagonist. We know that's the goal. But the entire film truly had focused on the fact that it's like, how do we avoid this? And I enjoyed that they failed several times. I
Yeah.
enjoyed that there was different ways they tried to go about it and to make sure Franklin was fine and all this stuff. Like, I appreciated that I didn't know what was happening next at any given time. I really
Yeah.
didn't. And I like that there was action in the middle and it wasn't just like a fight scene. Like, it was like the whole chase with the Silver Surfer and them in space was amazing to watch. And it's just like the moments like that that allow you to kind of be up and down throughout the entire movie. So you're not like, I'm getting a little bored, or I could tell we're reaching the climax. Like, I didn't know where the climax was going to be because
Yeah.
we kept going to all these things that you like. Obviously, when they're first in that chase with the Silver Surfer, I know it's not then, but like you do think about like, okay, is this it? How is this gonna go? Where does this play in? Like, it was just such a cohesive story, even though so much was happening, that I was genuinely into it the entire time. It didn't lose me at all.
Yeah, which is honestly, even the best Marvel films, I feel like lose me at a certain point. Like I'm just like, all right, this is taking too long, or like the pacing is a little
Yeah.
off here. And this film, you're right, they mixed those moments of quiet, of relationship building in so well with these larger pieces that move the plot forward, whether that was a chase or the Silver Surfer coming and ruining all of their bridge things, all of that.
That threw me off.
I
That
was
part, I was, like, stressed.
I was literally like sitting there like this. I was
No,
like,
so was
"Shola
I. I was like,
ball,
"Oh my god.
girl."
Oh my god."
I
Yeah.
know. I know. That was very, very stressful. But I to your point, I like how they kind of continued to try and they didn't always beat him. And it wasn't just like a physical battle where like, oh, they didn't beat Ultron that one time in that one city, but then they beat him in Sokovia. It was like, oh, we're gonna try, the bridges, she's gonna break them, but then we're gonna, use the one and just get him out of here, and that is gonna work. And that's, great. And we'll have a whole other episode about what is going on with Galactus
Yeah.
after that. But I think it was so well done in terms of the tone and the way that they were able to put those together and even like show strife within the family, right? And the
Yeah.
tension and the weight, watching Sue and Reed have a fight was like honestly emotionally, like I was like, oh my god, please mom and dad, no. But like, watching them like see how the stress put a toll on them individually, but then also their relationship and things like
Yeah.
that. I mean, also, side note, watching Sue give birth in space was not on my bingo card, but like,
I was like,
okay,
"What is
Franklin
going
Space
on?"
Baby.
No, I turned to my friend and I was like, "Dumb question, but, like, what's his passport and birth certificate eventually gonna say?" Because like, he wasn't even born on Earth, you know? Like, I
I
it's
don't know.
stupid, but that was the first thing I thought of when they, like, show them flying up to Earth right after she gives birth, and I was like, obviously he'll be American because his parents are American citizens. But I sat there and I was like, this is so strange because you don't have a place of birth. You were born in space.
Yeah, that was definitely not what I was expecting.
No.
Poor Sue. I mean, wow, that is a traumatic experience. And then when the Silver Surfer came in and was trying to literally reach inside her body,
Oh
I
my
was like,
god.
I almost was sick. I was like, this is horrifying.
Yeah.
Actually, what a violation. Other side note, the fact that Sue was able to make her body invisible to basically give,
See the
what is that, an
baby.
ultrasound? I was like,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. Like that's an interesting use of her powers.
Yeah.
And I want to just like talk about her for a sec because, we've seen other iterations of her. Truthfully, y'all know this. I've only seen the Jessica Alba version, but I love the fact that like they really focused a lot, from what I remember, a lot more on one, different uses of her powers, but two,
Yeah.
especially her level of power with the force fields, because obviously she's the invisible woman, and like that's what has typically been focused on in terms of her skill set and her power set in past iterations. But here you got to see the true strength and power of Sue Storm and what she's able to do. I mean, the woman literally beat back Galactus. So
Yeah.
anybody who wants to say that Sue Storm is like not that powerful, please sit down and watch this film because false. That's all I wanted to say.
No, I actually I want to talk about her and Johnny specifically. Um because I do actually think the past films in my opinion have focused on Reed and Ben more to me. So I actually really like that. I felt like the focus was on the Storm siblings in this more than anything. I don't get me wrong, obviously we did have Ben in there, we did have Reed, we did see different parts of their story, but I really like that personally. I felt like those two were focused on in very different ways than they were before. One of the ones with Sue that stuck out was her powers. I think some of that is because we got to see not the beginning. She's had these powers for 4 years. We've gotten to see what she's learned to do with them. So I
Yeah.
really liked it for that, area. And I think that's probably what plays a big role. But I also think I couldn't stop thinking about Wanda because how she's like, well, wouldn't any good mother do that? And all this stuff of being like, those are my boys. I'm going to get my boys. all I could think about was Sue is in her biggest fight or flight trying to protect her son this entire movie.
Yeah.
And they show that and the strength of a mother and what she would do and the lengths she would go to save her son. I just like, I thought that was such good storytelling. I really
Yeah.
was like, Sue, you got everybody behind you because you deserve the support and I get it. And so between showing her powers but also just showing her motherly power of just being strong and fighting for her son and protecting him. And that's what that entire thing with Galactus was truly her being like, you are not taking my son. I
Yeah.
will not let this happen. And obviously she sacrificed her life for him. That if
Yeah.
we're being like dead serious, she died. She was done.
Yeah.
And obviously then her son brought her back to life, and that's a whole other wormhole to get to. But I really did like the focus of her and how her being a mother played such an important role to all of this as well. But I really want to talk about Johnny. And not just because obviously I like Joseph Quinn, I from Stranger Things, and I've ended up like seeing almost everything he's been in since Stranger Things now because he's been in a lot. Like he's like
Yeah.
booked and busy. And I have to say, in my initial reactions, I said the same thing. I think he got the most backlash when they announced this cast. I think a lot of people
Him
were
and
were
Pedro,
like,
I think.
yeah. I think a lot of people were like, he doesn't look the role. How's he gonna play the role? I mean, if you watch him in Stranger Things, I was not worried about him being able to play Johnny Storm. But I think a lot of people were like, I don't know. First off, he killed it.
Yeah.
Him and Ben had me cackling the
Yeah.
entire movie.
Yeah.
I love their interactions. I think it was so like the whole family just it was wholesome, the whole thing.
Mhm.
But those two were hilarious together. He was great even by himself.
Yeah.
But what I loved more than anything is I love Chris Evans. We all know that. He is our fave. But I feel like they really had to dumb him down in his
Mhm.
movies.
Yep.
And if you think about the fact that they really like they get their powers from being up in space. Hey, you don't get to just like F around and find out to get into space. Like it's a process. You have to be smart, you have to be physical. Like there's so many things you have to do to be an astronaut. But I feel like they completely destroy the fact that he's actually smart
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
his movies. I was so happy that they showed not it wasn't just Johnny, but he was the one who stuck out because of how he's been played before. They showed how smart these guys are and how gifted they are and how well-rounded they are. And you actually sit there and you're like, I get it.
Yeah.
I actually can sit here and say, I understand how you went to space and got your powers and all this stuff without just being like, how did this guy get here? Because that's honestly how I feel sometimes about the Chris Evans ones. Is I'm like, how did you even end up in space? Like, I'm not sure. So I had to, I just have to say, I appreciated that from a writing perspective that they really showed how valuable Johnny is to the team more than just flame on, you know?
For sure. And I think the other thing that is, hi Gam, is a little bit missing in the way Chris Evans' version of the character was written, because I do want to, and I think you're trying to get at this too, like it's the way he was written, not necessarily Chris's
Yes.
portrayal. I
Yes.
think the character is just written super poorly in that version. I also think Sue's written super poorly, but again, it was the early 2000s, so most women were written super poorly. But anyway, for Johnny specifically, I think that version, the Chris Evans version, is very shallow, right? You see that. He's all about his looks. He's all about, women and all of that. And this Johnny loves women. He mentions that. He's like, I love space and I love women. And then I got a naked space woman. It's like my Venn diagram of happiness.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so they didn't remove that piece of the character, but what they added in, to your point, was the intelligence and a healthy dose of empathy. And I think
Yeah.
that character is so much more emotionally deep than the Chris Evans version, and he has so much more nuance to him. He, the fact that he's willing to sacrifice himself, and he literally says to them, like, tell Franklin his Uncle Johnny loves him. Like, I don't know that we would have seen the Chris Evans version make that play. And I think it
Yeah.
just adds a level of depth to the way that this character was written from the past, and it makes him so much more compelling than what we have seen in past versions, which is great because he can be funny and he can be, the comedic relief, but he can also be other things. And the fact that they were able to make him more than just one note, I think was not, or it helps support a fantastic pun intended, a fantastic film because it made the characters more interesting and it made you root for them that much faster.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think you still had all these elements to what their relationship looks like that mirrored what we saw before. I mean, you see Johnny making fun of Reed, and you, like I said, you see him and Ben going back and forth, but they were also still friends and things of that nature. You saw them hanging out and doing stupid crap and like poking fun at each other. You see all of that still, but you understand why these people are put on a pedestal. You get why these people are being supported the way they are because from all angles they're good people and
Yeah.
they are smart and they believe in doing the right thing. And so again, to kind of your point, it is how it's written completely. I think Chris's was great for what it was written as, but
Yeah.
I loved being able to see depth to Johnny Storm instead of just being, oh, he's a womanizer. Oh, he's this, that, or another thing. No, I loved that he was so deep as a character, but also hilarious and still Johnny Storm. And he did a great job at like I said, his one-liners and everything, like he just did so well. But I liked being able to sit there, like the fact they had him play such a significant role in the Silver Surfer and turning her mindset around and getting her to essentially not that he knew this was going to happen, but essentially make that sacrifice play at the end. I loved that because I think it created an interesting relationship between the two of them that starts at the very beginning when he's the only one that has the ability to fly up and follow her. But then to sit there and see how he spends all his time and effort figuring out an entire language, mind you, that he only got like what, maybe a couple words from her, and he was able to translate the rest of it and understand what happened to her and everything of that nature was so crazy to me.
Yeah.
And I
Talk
I
about
loved it.
brilliant.
Yeah, I loved it. I was like, yes, that is Johnny Storm. He is smart. He's more than
Yeah.
just a womanizer or a pretty face or anything of that nature. He is gifted beyond this. And so I really like that they gave him a moment to truly shine in the movie.
Yeah, I think honestly they did such a good job. And then I want to talk about Pedro because the fact that we've gone this long in the
I'm
reactions
actually
and
shocked that you've let it go this felt long.
I know, well, you got to save your man for like the right moment, and like this is the moment. But before I dive into my guy Pedro, I do want to say like as a unit, I think they did a really good job of giving everyone time. To
Yeah.
your point, I think in the past they focused on one or two characters, and here I do think yes, Johnny and Sue are kind of the ones that stand out. Maybe that's because they were so the past versions pale so much in comparison that it stands out so
Yeah.
much more where you're like these were barely even characters in the past because like they were so poorly written, whereas here they're fully fleshed out people who have, as we just talked about, many emotions, many different things about them. She's not just Reed's wife, she's also her own person, she's got her own powers, and she's a real baddie, like
Yeah.
everything we just said. So I think that's a piece of it too, but I was really so pleasantly surprised that they spent so much time with each character to make everybody someone that you would empathize with and someone that you really want to see more of, because I think it's so easy in movies like this to really focus on one or two. To focus on one.
Yeah.
My guy, Pedro. So I loved, obviously, I loved Pedro as Reed Richards. But I think the thing that I loved the most about this portrayal of Reed, and it's, I think, in my opinion, a combination of both acting and writing, is the way that they show how his mind is both a wonderful and brilliant thing that can bring so much advancement and progress and can help so many people, but can
Yeah.
also destroy him and his relationships. And I don't think, and again, it's been a hot minute since I've seen the originals, but I don't think we really explored that very much in, the original trilogy. Like, what is the dark side of being that utterly brilliant? We've seen it a
Yeah.
little bit with Tony. He was self-destructive, but Reed is self-destructive in a different way in that he's always thinking about the worst case scenario. He puts so much pressure on himself. As a type A person, I related to that on so many levels, and I, deeply empathize. But I think between writing him as this incredibly flawed, and I say that with love, but like a flawed man who is capable of both great good and potentially not so good things. I mean, there are versions of Reed Richards out there in the multiverse that are not great. You can see them in the comics, but writing him as flawed in this way, I think was so brilliant. And then to watch Pedro's, extremely nuanced performance in bringing that to life was just, I mean, chef's kiss. I was dying. I was like, this is amazing. And now they're talking about him potentially being the leader of the Avengers in the face of the MCU moving forward. I am the happiest girl on the planet. Like, yeah, I loved Reed. I loved Pedro. I thought the whole thing was just fantastic.
Yeah, I do think they did a really good job with Freed as well. I think they all had different depth to them. I think
Yeah,
probably the only one that didn't as much was Ben a little, but I
yeah,
do know they kind of hinted at him being still sad about the fact he is now a rock. But in its own way, I was kind of glad they almost didn't explore it just because I feel like that's such a big crux of every other movie. And I'm
yeah,
like, I've seen it a million times. And that's his entire story the entire time is that, he's no longer human. And I get it, but like, we've seen it. So I was
yeah.
kind of glad that it was like, it was hinted at, but he's adjusted and he's in a different place. I did like for Reed to see the depth. I also like to see how they brought out a different side of him and his mind when he had his child. When
Hmm.
Franklin was coming and all that, you could see a lot more of that darkness, as you kind of put it, in his mind and how his science went. And even Sue was calling him out, like, you did think about this. You did think about, you know, giving him up. And he was like, yes, I thought about giving him up, but not because I want to, but because the science in my mind doesn't let me not think about that, the probability and the fact that we'd save the entire world if
Yeah,
we gave him up. And so it's such an interesting kind of thought. Like, it's almost a breakdown of somebody who thinks logically and uses fact and everything versus somebody who thinks a little more emotionally. And I'm not saying she only thinks emotionally, but she's thinking, this is my son. Why would I ever even think about that? Versus
yeah,
he's like, using the probability and just the ratios and everything else that goes into this, I know this is the better option. I don't want to do it. That's where his emotional side comes in. But he is statistically aware that he's like, this would save more people. This would
yeah,
be the better option. So I think it was really interesting. And you could see how that caused a little bit of an issue and how that does cause an issue in their marriage of where she sees things from a more heartfelt perspective and he can't shut off the math and the science and doing all of that in his head to understand the facts, even if, the facts don't always equate to when you bring in an emotional part of this and a heartfelt part of this. So I really liked it. Like I said, I think they all did so well. Like
yeah.
I did not know what to expect being dropped into their story and they didn't miss a beat.
No, no. And the last thing I'll say about Reed, the scene where he's talking to Franklin and he's like, I was so worried that well, first of all, when he was like, I'm so worried you'd be like me, I was like, oh. And when they talked about, how he feels the guilt about going up and getting stuck in the storm and how he has, they have all forgiven him, but he still owns that so deeply, like a mark on
Yeah.
his soul. And for him to say to his son, like, I hope you don't turn out like me. I'm just going to let you be who you are. I was like, okay, it's fine. Like, I am not emotional at all, but I thought that was scene was incredibly moving, and yeah, that was just well acted, well written, and
Yeah.
to your point, I think all of the actors and actresses just absolutely owned it. And it was so well written, and that's honestly like such a killer combo. So many times I feel like we get one or we get the other. Actually, no, that's not true. We get good actors every time. It's the writing that sometimes falters. And to have both firing at all cylinders like this, I mean, just there are no words to just watch a masterpiece like this.
Yeah. Well, and even on the antagonist side, I mean, we know, and I think almost everybody knows the general story of the Silver Surfer. So we know she, in this case, but he in other iterations, because multiple people have been the Silver Surfer. But we know that she is not doing this for the fun of it. She saved her world and has become essentially a servant to Galactus in doing so. She sacrificed herself. And so I really liked seeing how she turned around, because when she came around and she was breaking those bridges, I was like, somebody smack her. Like,
I was so
but that
mad.
I was too, but that is the feelings that you should be feeling. And then for Johnny to do what, as I talked about a little earlier, do what he did, that was enough to turn her to sit there and say, you're right, I've been doing horrible things because I've saved my planet, and so I've been doing it in the name of saving my planet, but truly I've been killing all of these people. And for her to make the sacrifice play for the world essentially at the end instead of just her planet, I thought was such good writing. And it was such a nice parallel of seeing that she not only saved her planet, she ended up making the play to save the entire universe. And so I thought that was so well done. I did not expect her to come in at the end. I
I
really
didn't
thought they
either.
were going to sacrifice Johnny, because the whole time in my mind I'm thinking somewhere in here they get to 616. So as we're battling, all my mind is also kind of thinking about is somewhere in here, one of them at least has to get to 616. So I thought that was how he was going to do it. I thought it was going to end up being Johnny. And to have her swing in the last second, we don't address it. She just swings in and takes him out and is gone. And I was like, that was great writing. That
Yeah.
right there showed the depth to the Silver Surfer that we don't always get. And you didn't need the conversations to do it either. It was
Yeah.
her actions that you could really see how it all played out.
For sure. And I mean, for Johnny to play her the audio of the people that she essentially, assigned to death, I mean, that was diabolical, but extremely effective.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
All right. I do want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is what you
Literally.
just talked about, which is the fact, because we're going to, just for a little bit of context here, we're going to talk about the end credit scene, and we're going to talk about where the heck Galactus went in another episode. So that's why we're not going to talk about it today. But I do want to take the last, however many minutes we're going to be here to talk about the fact that we haven't gone to 616. So I've got a lot of questions, because that's the one thing where I'm like, that needed to happen. If you hadn't put so much weight on this film, I would say 11 out of 10 perfect. I mean, I still think 11 out of 10 perfect, but I would say 12 out of 10 perfect if they hadn't put so much weight and it didn't need to do that. So
Right.
now I'm confused.
So me too. Because I think the thing is it leaves that door open regarding who's on the ship. We still don't know. We don't know. It actually could be anybody. Obviously, this is not, spoiler free. Let's just say, while we aren't going to go into depth in this episode, we see Doom. Hello.
Yeah.
Totally weird, because normally I feel like they do the like more gaspy end credit second. So then I
To
sat
punish
there
the people who leave after one. That is
Well,
the point. That's why we all sit there for the second.
but it's also so that you kind of sit there and you're like, that's the last thing you walk out with, rather than I waited and I was like, oh, I mean, cute, but like,
yeah.
okay.
Well,
So
because you always make fun of the people who leave after one. You're like, is this your first Marvel movie? And then the
Right.
people who left after one were still rewarded. And I was like, no, look, I'm
Well,
not trying
I
to
also
gatekeep
was
it
like,
anyway, but
I was
stay for
not
two.
thinking straight at all when the end credits started, because I was not thinking that the first end credit would be like the whoa end credit. So when it started and you heard like the wishing noises while she was like in the kitchen and stuff, I genuinely was like, did he just weirdly age himself up? Because I'm trauma from the twins, right? Like that's what I was thinking about. Is I'm
Yeah.
thinking, did he like age himself, or did he just show a power? Like that's what I'm thinking.
Same.
And then boom, there was Doom, and I was like, what? What is going on right now? And then we just cut, and I was like,
yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
so that just happened. That just
It
happened.
did. It did.
Yeah, yeah. So here's my thoughts. No, we didn't end up in 616. Somebody in the Fantastic Four is going to be on that ship, and my assumption still, like, that still is a valid point. I'm thinking now we have two groups. We either have it is Doom, and he fled with Sue and her son, Franklin. They're on the ship, they fled, they somehow ended up in 616. I don't know. again, I only watched this movie like 2 hours ago, guys, so any theories are not going to be super fleshed out. Or it's the other half. It's the other three trying to find Sue, who was probably taken with Franklin by Doom. And by trying to find them, they end up jumping through the multiverse. And that's how they end up in 616. At this point, I'm seeing two teams. Like, this is kind of where this has to go. Because I don't think they're all showing up on that ship.
I absolutely disagree. I like
You think they're all on the
100%.
ship?
Yeah, because here's why. I think they started an incursion when they sent Galactus away, and I think they are fleeing a full incursion. Their world is about to get absolutely obliterated, and they're fleeing.
But how do you get that from the fact that Doom is there? Doom is kidnapping Franklin. Like, we know that's what that implies. And he's probably taking Sue because when you know from the comics, like, he wants his perfect little family.
I mean, okay, well maybe it's not all of them. Okay, let me process that differently. You're right. I don't think it's all of them, but I do think that the point what I'm getting at, and again, the stupid doomsday gets in my way, is
Oh,
like,
you mean the whole movie?
no, it does, because to me, that's the setup to Secret Wars. You have now Doom. I mean, I get it's different because they're all supposed to be together and then they get separated when the ship and all that incursions. But like, okay, if you want to do Secret Wars differently, you now have Franklin, you have Sue with Doctor Doom, a potential incursion because of what happened with Galactus. You cannot tell me you put something as large and cosmic as Galactus through essentially a wormhole, and that doesn't cause a problem. I also think that man was not only doing, calculations about like, what's the word I'm looking for? Teleportation. He was also doing multiversal calculations. So I'm not 100% convinced they sent Galactus into a different part of their universe. It is entirely possible, and I know we're going to explore this in the next episode more deeply, but it's entirely possible they sent him to a totally different universe, in which case, hello, potential incursion causer. So that's where I'm kind of like still getting stuck on the whole, what the heck is Doomsday about? I'm confused.
Well, either way, I don't think they're all together. I think that was the implication there. Nobody else was there with Sue and with her son. Like, they were by themselves, the two of them, and Doom would want the two of them. He obviously wouldn't want the rest of them. So I think regardless, whoever is on that ship, it's team A or team B. Like, I think we're separated no matter what. I don't disagree there are incursions. I think that's the point. Also, when they're looking for Sue and I almost said Nathaniel, and that's the first time I almost did that, so I'm glad I didn't. But when they're looking for Sue and Franklin, these incursions are happening, in which case they accidentally end up in 616. Like, that's been my running theory for 2 months, 2.5 months now since the Thunderbolts. I just think now we have a little more clarity of it's either Team A, which is Doctor Doom on that ship with Sue and her son, and the three of them on little, like, whatever, or it's Team B, which is Reed and the rest of them trying to find them, and they're crashing course into 616. Either way, I think that gives us a little clarity, I think, in my opinion, on who's there and why they might, like, you're like, oh, well, they're not on 616. Yes, but I think it's semi-implied now of one of the two is ending up there. We still don't know who, though.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree with that. I want to save the rest of this conversation for the breakout episode. That was just a teaser. So come back next week. We're going to break it down a little bit more. But yes, I didn't want to like completely ignore that piece because it is obviously huge. We're going to talk next week a little bit about, again, further down that theory, what the heck is going on with Galactus. I know we're going to talk about timeline and things like that because they casually dropped a 4-year time jump in there. So all of that will be covered in greater depth. This was just a little bit of initial thoughts here, but I don't know about you, Kate. I think I'm good on initial reactions for the film. Covered
Yeah, I just
everything I
want to
think I
say
wanted to talk
Galactus
about.
looked great. He was
Yes.
cool.
Yes.
I was
I
really
was a
glad to
little
see how they did
thrown.
him.
Yeah, I was a little thrown by him not, I guess in my
The whole
head,
ship versus like him just wandering the
yeah,
but also I pictured him literally walking through space. So I guess theoretically, I
Yeah,
like this. Like, I needed the ship to make more actual visual sense.
for sure. And I think
Yeah.
you're right, like, because I don't have a comic where I've seen Galactus in it. So, like,
Yeah.
in my head, the man was just like scooting. I feel like my hand's gonna get cut off in this video, so I'll do it closer to my face, but scooting his way through space and then literally just like opening his mouth and being like, yum.
Yes.
And like
No,
that was kind of what
exactly.
I was
That's
picturing.
fully how I also pictured it.
But to bring that to life on film, you do need some sort of mechanism. So I like the way they did it. It just wasn't
Yeah.
how my head was like, this is how it's gonna happen. It was
Yeah.
definitely a different take from like my little head canon.
It was a preferred take because I definitely don't know how I would have felt about it otherwise. Like,
Yeah, I feel
let
like
me
it's
just
hard to
eat this
wrap
like
your
a
head around.
cookie, you know? Like, that's weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
We'll also get into the whole his relationship to Franklin next episode because I think that's going to play into the future, obviously. So that is another topic that we'll cover because I know that whole little cute prophecy thing that drove him is another big element that we didn't touch on today. So we're going to clean up a few things that we didn't get to today in the next episode. So make sure you're tuning into that. But for today, this is our initial reactions to Fantastic Four First Steps. 11 out of 10. Fantastic, pun intended. I'm going to keep saying that. Film. And we will be back in the future with more Fantastic Four related content. So please make sure that you're subscribing on your podcast platform of choice. Website is linked down below, as well as our Buy Me a Coffee in case you want to support us. All that can be found in the show notes.
You guys can also follow us on all of our socials, which are also down in the show notes. And as T kind of said, next week we will also be doing more Fantastic Four coverage with some of our breakout episodes. So make sure you guys come back next week as we talk more about Fantastic Four. And we hope you guys watched it because, again, you shouldn't have listened to this episode if you haven't. But go see it again if you really liked it. Go support it. It's set to do very well in the box office. So let's make sure it does. But
My
Marvel
theater
just
was
blew your
full.
mind. So let's talk about it.